I'm grateful to the foundation for having given me an opportunity to once again interact with the citizens of the cultural capital of Karnataka. So something interesting happened. Over the last few weeks, something new has been brewing on the Sabarimala front, which most people are not aware of. So a petition was filed, perhaps a few months ago, challenging a notification issued by the Kerala state government and the Travancore Devaswam board. The notification effectively said that, it invited applications from members of the Malayali Brahmin community for the position of the male Shanti of the Sabarimala temple. Now, this notification is the subject of a challenge before the Kerala High Court on the grounds that the eligibility criteria spelled out in the notification is violative of principles of Article 14 of the Constitution and violative of principles of equality, and that perhaps it has a slightly casteist tone. That seems to be the subject of challenge. And I wasn't aware of it. Barely a week ago, I was made aware of it. And fortunately, an entity which has been fighting for the traditions of the temple in the Supreme Court, People for Dharma, engaged me once more to argue the matter. And the court has been taking up this matter almost every Saturday. So today, when I was supposed to leave from Bangalore to Mysore, is when the matter got listed at 10:15 in the morning. So fortunately, thanks to the change in workflow patterns which COVID has induced, I was able to do this hearing virtually. So I was on the way from Bangalore to Mysore doing the hearing and listening to the entire arguments because my turn is yet to come. The court has been kind enough to reserve a specific date so that I can make my submissions on the 28th of January. The nitty-gritties and the nuts and bolts of the case apart, my sense is that this is the third round of challenge to the practices of the temple. The first happened in the 50s. The second happened in 2006 through the petition that resulted in the judgment of 2018, where gender was the weapon. The third round of attack involves caste. It is relentless. It's almost as if the temple can't catch a break. It's almost as if the temple can't breathe in peace. And somehow that deity seems to be constantly under some kind of challenge under one pretext or another. Beyond this, I will not make any submissions which I wish to make before the court. One, because the matter is sub judice, and second, I don't see the point in revealing my script. But the larger question being that this is perhaps indicative of the state of affairs. Perhaps the larger point that I'm trying to make is that while we keep taking confidence and drawing heart from political victories, some things continue unchanged, regardless of who is in power. And over the last few months, and especially after the second book was done and dusted, I felt that it's important to impress upon whatever little audience that I'm in a position to engage with, the need to invest in policy more than politics. Because policy is more long-lasting, it has effects which last beyond a generation. And politics which do not result in change in policies are ephemeral in nature in terms of victories. So, in terms of my own change of attitude, perhaps there will be a shift from my fire and brimstone style of submission to a slightly more calm way of engaging with people. Because I think getting people excited is only half the job done, but if they don't know what they're supposed to do with that excited energy, then I think it's a loss of an opportunity. And after 5 years or 6 years of engagement with the public, over 400 lectures, I'm in some position to at least push through a few ideas and hope that it translates to policy push. I'm hoping that this state, and I've said this very often, given the kind of legacy that it continues to enjoy, the dharmic legacy that continues to be seized of, will be at the forefront of it. I think earlier this year, we had an announcement being made by the government. Rest assured, I certainly want to assure the organizers that given the nature of the August platform that I'm speaking from, I will rein in my usual controversial tendencies, and I will keep this as diplomatic as possible. Despite that, if something comes out, please attribute it to the noblest of intentions. All I can say is a few months ago, when a statement or a policy statement was issued by the government of Karnataka that they're interested in releasing temples from state control, barely a week ago, I think that statement was taken back. That proposal has been dropped, citing some kind of bureaucratic hurdle. I'm not even sure how many people paid attention to it, because the announcement managed to grab a lot of headspace and headline space, but the retraction of the proposal hasn't found enough traction. So this is exactly how we move 2 steps forward and 4 steps backward. It's like a reverse salsa at play. I don't know what's going on here. So how does this tie into the larger theme of the second book? I have learned much more valuable lessons from the proponents of Pakistan than from the Congress party during the course of the writing of the book. Their single-minded focus, their ability to marshal muscle where needed, their ability to bring muscle and brains together when needed, and their ability to stick to their positions with zero moderation or dilution is something now I have come to deeply admire. I've said this often. The state of the Hindu society today is largely a product of its policy of accommodation, concession, and moderation. And therefore, that's a slippery slope, which effectively comes to a point where you see absolutely nothing worthy of preservation. So someone tried to, so during the course of a friendly argument with a colleague, I was told that I'm a conservative, and apparently the friend is a liberal. So I basically said, where do these words come from? And what meanings would you want to impute to these terms in the Indian context? But even if I were to accept the allegation that I'm a conservative, I'll proudly wear it as a badge of honor. Because at the end of the day, it is the conservative who sees value in preserving something of the past. Identity is preserved by conservatism. Continuity of identity and tradition is the single direct product of conservatism. Therefore, any negative connotations which are imputed to conservatism need to be done away with. Those who protect achara, sampradaya, tradition are the ones single-handedly responsible for keeping the bija alive. They are in the business of keeping, or let's say in the business of bija raksha. So if conservatism translates to bija raksha, I'm guilty of it. I happily plead guilty. Why is this important? I think gradually we are moving to a point where all our angry energies are being misdirected at the worst of issues possible, also reflecting our lack of priorities. I don't know if people have been following the controversy surrounding a particular movie in Bollywood that's been released and the song which was released over the last 2 to 3 weeks. I was really aghast. I'm not going to comment on what I feel about that particular song or the movie in general. But is a movie and a song more important to the Hindu community than policy? Has it come to a point where we really don't understand what is important? I certainly am not someone who will stand up for any kind of denigration of a religious belief through the popular culture. I'm not for it one bit. But it's surprising that we're able to muster this kind of traction and this kind of support for the boycott of a movie. But when it comes to getting the job done on the policy front, there is practically no traction at all. So it seems as if we latch on to small, myopic, seeming victories and let go of everything that's important. So the elephant manages to slip through the hands, but we manage to retain the tail of the elephant and keep crying. So I genuinely hope that by the time we inch towards 2024, the community manages to crystallize its serious policy concerns and pushes it into the electoral agenda of major parties. And I use the word parties in plural, not in singular. Because unless that is done, 2014 is done, 2019 is done, 2024 will also be done. And perhaps you may get more than 303. Would it have translated to a better situation from a policy perspective for the community that has voted the dispensation to power? That's the hard, uncomfortable question that I would choose to ask. Please do not feel the need to constantly clap for anyone. It makes really no sense. That's all I would say. I genuinely don't believe that everything that comes out of my mouth is a pearl of wisdom that requires applause. Apply this to the macro level for anybody else in public life. I am not in public life in the sense of occupying a public position or a constitutional position. Those occupying positions of power must be held to hard account on the promises made and their delivery, so to speak. I think it's a fantastic luxury we have at this point, where there are still significant portions of this great land which have not yet been subjected to Pakistanification. Count those blessings. And while you still have the ability to preserve the core of this country, make sure that a few hard deliverables are achieved. Because usually, what seems like peacetime lulls you into a certain degree of complacence, coupled with electoral victories, and a lot of things happen under the radar which go completely unnoticed. Perhaps I'm asking the audience to become aware of not the stillness at the surface, but at the layers below the surface, and recognize certain patterns and movements. We live in an unfortunate generation where newspapers cannot be trusted, where news channels cannot be trusted, and I say this across the board. Nobody is neutral anymore. Everything is fully partisan. Therefore, the burden of having to discern and decipher the truth is entirely on the reader. It's an extremely difficult position to be in, because each person presents his or her own narrative with a lot of conviction and a lot of gusto, leaving you with the question, as a common person who has his or her own life to take care of, how am I expected to make the right informed choice if this is the kind of competing narratives that I'm constantly presented with? That is where perhaps it's important to build a core group of people, or a core group of institutions for that matter, whose only job is to preserve your interest and advance your agenda. Because political actors will always have their own incentives and pulls and tugs. Rest assured, at a certain level you realize that the pulls and tugs don't necessarily come from within, but they come from outside. To a huge extent. In the age of multinationals, never underestimate the power of influence coming from outside. I don't wish to purvey or push any conspiracy theories. All I can say is that these are the realities at a certain level. The question that perhaps I would also want to ask myself is, the anger and the excitation that we see during the elections with respect to scandals and corruptions, have they translated to convictions at all in the first place after 9 years of being in power? If that's not the case, it's almost as if there is an unsaid rule that certain lines will not be crossed between two seemingly opposing factions. Which means we can keep fighting with each other on Facebook, but looks like the fight there is not exactly a fight. That's all I will limit myself to saying. And in such a precarious position, you end up even asking yourself, is the democratic setup a facade for power sharing between two groups? That takes you to a larger serious question. But I'll keep those meta questions for later. Maybe I'll ponder over these questions maybe 25 years later, when I know for a fact that the safety and security of my community is assured, which I'm not assured of as of now. In the age of assumed neutrality and unspoken partisanship, let me say this bluntly. I have biases, I have prejudices, and I have very clear positions. My priority is my community and nobody else. I have no interest in running in a popularity contest to get applause and acceptance from across the board. I don't even want applause and recognition from my own people as long as they can take care of themselves. So the hope is that we try and produce more people who are intransigent, who are hawks, and who are hardliners, and therefore who are conservatives to the bone. The value of conservatism is something that crumbling societies like Europe and America are beginning to realize gradually after having given way to hyper-individualism, where the core unit, which is the family structure, has been destroyed beyond recognition. The kind of assault that this core unit has been subjected to is unimaginable. So I don't see the point in living in a country which provides for great infrastructure, fantastic roads, amazing quality of life, but whose societal infrastructure has completely made way for the most hedonistic, chaotic kind of lifestyle imaginable. I don't know what is the incentive for someone who's lived in a society like Bharat to move to the West, unless you yourself have given up on the value of the family unit, and therefore your priorities are slightly different. I can completely relate to the position of the people who moved to the West until 1991 or perhaps even until the early 2000s because of lack of opportunities despite qualification. Because you want to equip yourself with advanced degrees in the hope that you come back and serve this country. I get all of that. But I don't understand the continued exodus, at the very least, I'd say from 2010 onwards. So, most people might mistake the theme of the second book as being Pakistan-centric, given its color, given the title, and given the subject and the examination of the two-nation theory. Rest assured, that is only the first layer, that is only the topsoil. The harder questions that I'm perhaps asking myself is, what is it that the Muslim community has done right which Hindus have not? That's a very serious question to ask. Maybe there's a There's a different way of looking at the question. But in general, I think they've done quite a few things right. I'm sure most people wouldn't have expected these words to come out of my mouth. But I'm a serious realist who is ruthless when it comes to SWOT analysis. The truth may be unpalatable, it may be uncomfortable, but you don't have the option of pixelating it or sugarcoating it. Should you choose to do so, the truth does not suffer, you will suffer, that's it. So I'd say that more than the first book, the second book has been a greater realization. There's a decent chance that the first book was also written with a certain degree of ego investment, which is to say that I want to put out myself out there as someone who can write. And I was answering to the left's constant jibes that members of the non-left don't have brains, this and that. So maybe it was my intellectual ego which drove the exercise behind the writing of the first book. But by the time the writing of the second book was done halfway through, the ego had to make way for serious realization. That these questions are not esoteric questions for us to ponder over after the age of 60, but these are existential, survival-related questions at a very fundamental level. So as a conscious choice, one of the things that I've decided, and maybe this is my New Year resolution, the Gregorian New Year resolution, that's not a new year, is that I will significantly wind down my public engagements over the course of the next 1 year. Be hyper selective in the interest of producing more content out which can last the test of time and posterity than ephemeral YouTube videos which translate only to thug life videos. I'm not interested in it. This is a very conscious decision that I've taken in the hope that it translates to something more productive and more valuable. And in this sense, my inspiration is a leading stalwart and a child of this city, Sri S.L. Bhairappa. I was told that one of his most popular statements, and since I don't exactly understand Kannada as much, I was told that one of the things that he said, and I'm paraphrasing it here, is that Sahitya Krishi requires silent work. I am not exactly a writer or an author. It's a demotion for a practicing lawyer to be called an author and a writer. I will never accept those tags. I don't earn my livelihood from either of these two facets. I don't wish to, I don't want to. Because I'm extremely proud of my capabilities as a lawyer. There's not a single humble bone in my body when it comes to my legal skills. I don't wish to be humble about it the Indian way. Oh, I also know something. I don't relate to that kind of humility at all. I'm happy to learn from anybody else, but I don't see the point in downplaying myself. And therefore, the hope through this moonlighting exercise of writing is to engage with the society going beyond the confines of my profession. And the more I realize that there is so much that I don't know, I feel every public engagement is time lost in reading more. And perhaps my greatest regret is that I don't know a single non-English language or an Indian language with the proficiency and fluency with which I can speak this damned language called English. For someone who constantly speaks of decoloniality, I think it's a badge of shame, not a badge of honor. And I will take away the argument from the Dravidianist idiots that I don't know how to write or read Tamil, despite it being my mother tongue. All this effectively means that I have to make more time despite my existing professional commitments. And the only way I can do that is to go easy on the constant travel and put my head down and do more. In that sense, I'm very happy that Mysore happens to be perhaps the turning point of this decision, because in this book tour calendar, we initially decided around 11th of December. And the last two places that I wanted to visit before I said Swaha, closure sesame for this, was Kashi and Mysore. One because of Shiva and the other for the lady sitting at top of the hill, Chamundeshwari. I hope to wind down this tour with this session. Anything else that comes about will be responded to and reciprocated only as an act of public courtesy, but with really no private or personal investment, because I'm done with this shosha for a while. The hope is that I hope to at least think of a flagship platform using the royalty from the books to create a debating platform for the next generation, so that they know how to present an argument, so that they know how to build an argument, so that they know the art of research, so that they understand the importance of powerful, confident, calm articulation. These are essential skills for this community, because you will be constantly asked to defend your identity and justify your identity and explain your identity in the coming years. So, as someone who thinks that he has something to contribute on this particular front, I've been talking to a few like-minded friends about this in the hope of creating some kind of a flagship event. Because I think I'm getting repetitive, and two, the idea is to get more and more youngsters into this entire movement and give them an opportunity to hone and sharpen their skills with the guidance of a lawyer and with the guidance of a lot of other people who are subject matter specialists when it comes to their own areas. Let's see how that this seed of an idea translates to something real. But I'm happy that I'm getting to share this with the enlightened audience of Mysore. And I hope that Mysore will feature significantly as part of this plan, so to speak, in terms of attracting talent for dharmic articulation, not just in English, but in all Bharatiya languages.